Morning, folks. Welcome back to Threes and Bobo here. I have to chuckle because this is take 9. I tend to get screwed up a little bit when I first get started. I'm not a professional. I love telling stories. I don't have a production crew. I don't have an editing crew. I just sit here and tell the story, and sometimes I get tongue-tied and tongue-twisted. And I've had a heck of a time with it this morning. And anyway, take 9. And then I'll take off. Okay. Last week I flew down to San Antonio, Texas for the 52nd Annual POW Dining In at Randolph Air Force Base. A dining in is a formal military dinner. A dining out is the same formal military dinner, however, wives and spouses are included. Okay. We began holding these functions in 1973. If you add 52 years, you come up with 2025. Okay. The dining in was held to honor our North Vietnamese POWs. And it's a very, they typically tend to be very humbling, somewhat festive occasions, very dignified occasions, and a great deal of fun to attend. These guys are just amazing. At any rate, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, so let me wind myself back. Give you a little bit of background. After our guys completed 100 missions up north, they came back to the base. They were met with fire trucks, squad cars, commanders' cars, and guys from the squadron and whoever we had around to form a parade, and then were led into parking. Once they parked, they were met with fire trucks that hosed them down, and then they were given bottles of champagne. Okay, the guys that were shot down were not met with fire trucks or squad cars, or it was not a very festive occasion, and they certainly were not given a bottle of champagne once they reached their various prisons. Those people were really tacky up north. But at any rate, when they were released in January 1973, after they were given physicals and a period of acclimation, those who wanted to fly and were qualified to fly came to our squadron for requalification, and we used the T-38. When they came into the squadron, we gave them a designated freedom call sign, beginning with Freedom 01, 02, 03, and so forth. Bud Flesher was the first one, Freedom 01. Now, Bud was shot down in December 1966, and he had his freedom flight in the first one in May 1973. So it didn't take long to get him back into the air once he was released. They would take him up, get him acclimated to flying again, bring them back to the base, and then upon landing, they were met with fire trucks and all the guys that they flew with, and a lot they were held in jail with, and given a bottle of champagne. It really was quite an event to attend. At any rate, Freedom 01, 02, and 03. After the initial cadre or initial guys were all checked out, we began to pick up other guys who went to flying later on. Some guys, when they came back, went to various schools. Some wanted to become doctors, some wanted to become lawyers, this, that, and the other. But then they decided they wanted to come back to flying. We put them through the program. So it continued on for about 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I'm not sure how long it came. But then there were those that weren't able to fly because of physical issues, and we began to take them on freedom flights and gave them the same treatment that we gave the initial cadre that came through. To give an example, in March 1988, I flew with Colonel Fred Cherry on Freedom 165, and that was truly a humbling experience to fly with Colonel Cherry. He had been shot down in October 1965 and released again in 1973. So he'd been held up there for about a little over 7 years, for goodness sake. At any rate, I've told this story in another video, but I'm going to go ahead and retell it here to give you an idea of just what an honor it was to fly with these guys, what a privilege it was. So I knew Colonel Cherry because he had been in my father-in-law's squadron at the time he was shot down. I'd heard about him. Well, I'd heard about him for a long time, if you will. And he had been injured, severely injured, when he came out of the jet. And to the point where he would never fly again by himself. But we could take him for a ride. So a good friend of mine had run into him over at Maxwell Air Force Base, got to talking to him, and Colonel Cherry was unaware of the program we had at Randolph. So Rat asked him if he would be interested in taking a T-38 ride. Well, of course he would. So Rat wrote a letter to the wing commander at the time, Nick Kehoe, and asked him for permission to take Colonel Cherry for a ride that year, 1988. And he mentioned that I had a connection with Colonel Cherry through my father-in-law. Well, Colonel Kehoe graciously agreed, and Colonel Cherry came over for the flight. I met him in the morning before we flew, gave him a briefing and so forth. And after we got strapped in and taxied out, got to the end of the runway, given permission to take off, we were Freedom 165. The sequence kind of went like, got airborne gear and flaps, and I called San Antonio departure, or something on the order of San Antonio departure, Freedom 165 is airborne Randolph passing 1500 for flight level 230. San Antonio comes back and says, Freedom 165 radar contact, you're cleared to flight level 230. And he hesitated for a moment or two, and he came back on the radio and he said, welcome home, sir. Oh man, I still have a tough time telling that, because on that day when he said welcome home, sir, my eyes just welled up. I said, Colonel Cherry, it's your aircraft. And I put my hands up to show had my hands off the stick, and he flew for the rest of the flight, essentially. It was that powerful of an experience, and it still is. And so we come back to today. When Colonel Cherry and I returned, we were met with fire trucks and we were met with champagne. It was just a magic time. Unfortunately, Colonel Cherry has passed away, but I still hold a place of deep respect for him in my heart, and I always will. Okay, that being said, coming back to present day, they had a couple of guys, a Navy captain this year, and I think maybe a couple other guys, I wasn't there for this part of the event, that they took on freedom flights. And then we showed up at the dining in and dining out. They are not attended like they had been in the past. These guys are beginning to show up now in their 80s and in some occasions their 90s. They're getting up there as we all are. But it still was an event that was very dignified. And I think they did a great job in honoring these guys. And it was a privilege to be able to attend this year. Don't know how many more years they're going to hold them or how many years I'll be able to attend. A couple of years ago, we were sitting out on the porch of the Bachelor Officer Quarters in one evening. That was for the 50th. And as we're sitting out there talking, a couple of POWs said, don't know how many more years I'm going to be able to attend or if I'm going to be willing to attend. And one of their wives says, oh yeah, you're going to attend. And he looked at her and said, I suppose you're right. And by gosh, they still show up, and it's so great to see them. At any rate, that's kind of what I've been up to. I just beam with pride when I think of those guys, and I'm very humble to be able to be in their presence. So that being said, this is Bobo Base Gear Stop.